great works of postmodern garbage, written and performed by #1 Marmaduke fan. Tonight's episode, The Connected Body Project of 1994. This program is generously supported by you, the viewer, with your likes, comments, and subscriptions. Do click the bell to receive some jolly good notifications. Yes, what? I am furious. But for your sake, dear viewer, I must contain it. The Connected Body, an interdisciplinary approach to the body and performance, was published in 1996. I do not own this book, but was assigned certain chapters as class readings, which I still own. Unfortunately, the original book is prohibitively expensive, but this is such a compelling example of progressive academic theory's relationship with contemporary art that I am firmly convinced it's worth the time to discuss the chapters I have read. Rick Alsop and Scott Delahunty wrote the introduction collaboratively. The introduction, The Connected Body, opens with a quote from Mexican poet Octavio Paz. "The universe unfolds in the body, which is its mirror and its creature. Our era is critical. It has destroyed the old image of the world, and as yet has not created another. That is why we do not have a body." If you are confused, don't worry, so am I. I'm going to try as best as I can to put some of this into plain English. The authors identify 5th century BC pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus as one of the earliest thinkers fascinated with the concept of the body. We are estranged from that with which we are most familiar. Heraclitus is famous for his observation that no man ever steps in the same river twice. Nature is constantly in a state of change. I think the reason Heraclitus is being cited is to give an air of historicism to a more postmodern concern, questioning the legitimacy of the body as a concrete concept. So, you and I might look at our bodies and say, of course I have a body. Look, it's right here. But to the authors of this introduction, that answer isn't so obvious. Octavio Paz is referred to as a contemporary example of the struggle with the body as a coherent site of representation and presence. Let me try to break this down. To a person who looks at their body and says, "Yep, that's my body, those are my fingers," this is not a significant problem. You can represent a body, for example, in a painting, or say the body has presence. Look, there you are. You're in the room with me. You have presence. But if you start with the assumption that the idea of the body may not be real or concrete, then it follows that things like representing the body or the body having presence will no longer make sense to you. If you're like me, you might be wondering whether a philosopher who questions the existence of the body as a coherent site of representation and presence also questioned his need to eat breakfast this morning, or whether his stomach won that argument. But what's going to be difficult for the rest of this introduction is we are going to have to accept as a premise that these authors are questioning the body as a coherent concept. I don't accept the author's premise, so I had to use a simple illustration just so I could put myself in a frame of mind where I could read the rest of this chapter without dumping it in the trash. When I was about 7 years old, I would occasionally lie awake at night wondering how strange it was that I happened to be me in particular. I'd imagine what it might be like to experience the world from another person's perspective, or imagine myself floating on the ceiling looking down on myself, in contrast to how my daily life went. When I played with Legos, I saw them through my eyes, and when I stepped on Legos, I was the one who cried. I can't find it, but I'm fairly sure there is a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip where Calvin is wondering about a similar topic. Now imagine that sort of 7-year-old's existential crisis, but stretched out to book-length form with a needlessly technical vocabulary, and I think we will be somewhat prepared for what awaits us. In this book, performance art or body art is identified as a variety of approaches to framing this idea of a separation between a theorized body and an experienced body. The authors believe that the theorized body, as represented, gendered, located, presented or absented, is privileged over the experienced body. In other words, how you think of your body in your head, including gender, is given priority over the biological stuff that actually makes up your body. They write that this double status of the body was part of both modernist and postmodernist art. What is an example of the body as a focus of an artistic experiment in modernist art? Though the authors do not use this illustration, I would point to a painter like Jackson Pollock as an example. You could say on one level that the most interesting thing about Jackson Pollock's paintings is how nice or not nice they look when hung on a wall. But another interesting thing about Jackson Pollock is how he painted these paintings, bending over massive canvases with house paints, using sticks to flick the paint with sweeping gestures of his arm. Using their typical word salad, the authors describe something similar to what I'm trying to illustrate: the body as an experimental site, as presence, a dynamic, moving, transforming, and resistant body, and as a site of representation, as reference, as object, as complex of meanings. Pretty much they're restating this contrast. There's the body you have and the body in your head. You're going back and forth between these two. The reason these authors are interested in performance art is they see it as experimenting with either the physical experience body or the intellectual theory or idea of the body. They quote Lewis Hyde, "A work of art is a gift, not a commodity." My prejudice would be the exact opposite. Artworks are obviously commodities. You sell artwork. If you do not sell it, it costs you something to produce it. It is a product of your time and labor. If the artwork is a physical object as opposed to a digital work, it has to be physically packaged, moved, and displayed. Hyde's quote is focusing on a more spiritual idea of art, maybe the idea that creativity isn't something you can wrap up in a Christmas present. The authors explicitly contrast their view with that of Western culture, which they believe marginalizes the body. What I take this to mean is that Western culture, by thinking about the body in concrete terms, ends up marginalizing this fuzzy feeling about the body which they are expressing and which postmodern performance art relies upon. Citing Roy Porter, who contributed to this book, they call the body an invisible part of history, quote, marginalized within a hierarchy of knowledge that privileges language and the mind. Again, what? What? Okay, if you're doing history and are reading about the writings of a historical figure, you are putting the emphasis of your study on that person's brain. Here's what they thought about. Here's what they wrote about. The authors think this is Western culture, again, marginalizing something. They want to focus on the body. They see the economy as commodifying the body. So, if you hire a construction worker to move heavy building materials around, that's his body being commodified. There is value in his physical labor. If a supermodel consents to be photographed so that those construction workers buy the magazine because they love looking at supermodels, her body has been commodified. The 1994 project, The Connected Body, was an interdisciplinary conference and performance art project, which was the prompt for this book being written. By the author's description, they were concerned with resisting the commodification of the body. Rather than focus on the body as a cog in the machine of capitalism, they're concerned with the value of the body on an individual and communal level. They quote Nigel Stewart, a participant in this project, to illustrate the point. Like the preceding paragraphs, it's difficult to decipher Mr. Stewart. As an aside, many artists seem to use the word performance as a shorthand for avant-garde performance art, and Mr. Stewart refers to performance as opposed to, say, performance art. He believes a major issue in performance was a tension between experiencing the body as connected and reflecting upon and representing the body as disconnected. Again, there's the body you have and the body as you think of it in your head. Stewart identifies this as an ontological and ideological problem. Ontology is the philosophy of being or existence. What does it mean to exist? How do you know you exist?
Stewart suggests that some people might connect their disconnected body, the idea in your head, with the connected body, the molecules and atoms and bones and muscles that make up your body, through things like exercise or yoga. And Stewart's writing indicates that people at the Connected Body Project participated in yoga and exercise sessions as part of their astute exploration of this philosophical problem. Stewart contrasts these practical workshops with speakers at the event who criticized Western culture for disturbing this connection. So, through the transcendent power of yoga, you might very well enjoy the sense of peace which comes from bridging the gap between your physical body and your mental conception of the body. But those gosh darned Westerners just had to screw it all up with their, quote, discontinuous and unstable appropriations and ideological representations of the body throughout the history of Western culture and within an increasingly mediatized and technologically driven world culture. Damn those Western artists and inventors. I was well on my way to achieving enlightenment before those meddling Westerners came along with their discontinuous and unstable appropriations. In the minds of these authors, the body is always a big, fat question mark. Your body is at odds with how your body is represented in the social, cultural, and physical worlds. Do you see the connection here with ideas like gender is a social construct or science is a Western tool? The art they are interested in is the art being fueled by this idea. Art questioning the body, presence, representation, identity, and subjectivity. So, not only is questioning the nature of the body on the table, questioning the nature of identity as a coherent concept is also on the table. They mention that the origin for this 1994 project began in 1993 at the Center for Performance Research in Cardiff in the United Kingdom on the points of contact between performance, shamanism, and ritual. Dear Internet, I'm betting you $1 of donuts that the British taxpayer generously funded the Center for Performance Research in Cardiff's exploration of performance art and shamanism in 1993. And just think, without government funding of such critical artistic research, you and I might never have gotten to enjoy this fine piece of literature. Quote, an ethnographic film, Sucking Doctor, was screened as part of a presentation on shamanic practice by Professor Sam Gill of the University of Colorado. It documented a healing event in which a female Pomo Indian shaman cured her husband in front of a gathering of witnesses. What we were struck by was not only the spatialization of the event, its blend of the everyday and the non-ordinary, the theatrical and the magical, but the manner in which the healing process was induced by a literal hands-on manipulation of the body. Now, if you're wondering what a sucking doctor might be, it's not as bad as you might be thinking based only on this description. I've linked to a few examples of the esteemed medical practice of sucking doctors in the description below. The authors go on to describe, in typical word salad level detail, just how mesmerized they were by the Sucking Doctor film, and how they connected the work of a sucking doctor with their work in body work and new dance. In particular, the School for New Dance Development in Amsterdam, which goes by the acronym SNDO. What's the School for New Dance Development?
I am a teacher at the School for New Dance Development, which is a school for choreographers, which is not so much about making steps. We are not dealing so much with the typical ballet or making steps and repeating them, but we are training people to become makers, and they use the body. So to pass by the rational idea and also to pass by the mechanical idea of the body, because what people often see with dance is you train a lot of technique, muscle, bone and everything. And yeah, of course we use that, but I also like to pass by that and to go into other layers for the research. So then we speak about, let's say, body-mind connection.
So, if you think back to the tension described in the first few paragraphs of this intro, the connected and disconnected body, this is the type of work the world needs to overcome the gap created by those wily, wicked Westerners. On the topic of the connected body, the authors say the body can't be a common, universal experience. Were you hoping to live in a world untroubled by representation, gender, identity, and presence? Well, too bad. That utopia may be a bit beyond our reach. But this sense of a shared body, before Western culture constructed things like gender, is what spoke to the participants of this project. Quote, in ways that are increasingly difficult to keep in touch with. You mean to tell me that it's difficult to describe one's experience and thoughts after participating in the Connected Body ? Project? Well, I should hope so, if tax dollars are going to support an art project exploring the connections between the connected and disconnected body. There just better be no darned westernized explanation of what you learned from the experience. The Connected Body ? Project, which grew out of these prior projects, was held at the SNDO in Amsterdam between August 20th through the 28th, 1994. All the artists and scholars and educators who attended embraced both the body, and they use air quotes to describe the body, not me, the body's inherent connectedness and its cultural construction. Well, thank God, because if there was even one accursed Westerner allowed to attend, that would have stunk up the whole event. Isn't this whole event a waste of time, money, and energy? Damn it, David Hume, you're such a party pooper! So the goal was to bring together a wide diversity of postmodern nonsense so that through their diversity of thought and experimental art theory, they could improve their practice and understanding of contemporary art. They held a forum on the topic of the body's effect on live art. They sought to move toward a new authenticity that accepted notions of the body's essential experience and constitution, as well as its fragmentary and constructed nature. Please remember, the air quotes around the word body, indicating it as a term of art, is theirs, not mine. They are talking about the idea of the body as if it is something that is alleged to actually exist. You know, those contemptible Westerners seem to think it's actually a thing, but we astute intellectuals, we're still on the fence about it. Hey artists, do you want to participate in our prestigious project? Well, we need you to be sincere. Do you authentically accept the notion that the body is fragmentary and constructed? Do remember that participating in this event could be your open door to wild success in the contemporary art scene and museum representation. Just be sincere now. What does the rejection of Western culture mean to you? How do you feel about it? I'm sure every artist present was deeply and authentically committed to the idea of using performance art to question Western assumptions about identity and the nature of the human body. No other motivations could possibly be at work here. The workshop was interdisciplinary. They were interested in how contemporary art might blend into other fields. Part of the problem is they were looking for an authenticity which was uncontaminated by filthy, disgusting Western culture, and had to accept a sad possibility that maybe, just maybe, we've internalized Western propaganda. It is never possible for us to discover an authenticity that is not mediated by cultural attitude, social convention, or political ideology. The body is perhaps our final point of resistance, and seems to many who explore its systems, its geographies, and its histories to hold out the promise of an authenticity which will transcend the limitations of its construction. The reason they want interdisciplinary work is they are hoping the body itself will be a field of resistance against Western ideas about the body. Their goal is to transcend the limitations of the body's construction. That did not jump out at me enough to highlight it during my first read-through, but this shocked me when I returned to this for my second reading. They actually believed they were working towards a transcendental goal by experimenting with performance art and new dance, as prompted by sucking doctor shamanism. This is religious language and thinking. They equate authenticity with ambivalence. Quote, framed within given sets of constructs, a space that remains only in between. Coming to conclusions, finding answers, creating endings or closures concerning the question of a connected body was never part of our strategy. I want to underscore this. If you look into a problem, maybe you are trying to answer a question that is bugging you, or you're trying to build something, do you have a goal that involves finding a solution to the problem? Do you want to conclude your exploration with an answer to the question that started it? Well, that's a Western priority. As a goal, this contemporary art project wanted inconclusiveness, open-ended explorations. Here are the fine art performance artists who are named as participating: Marina Abramovic, Valley Export, Linda Montano, Alastair McLennan, Sally Tallant, and others. The new dance practitioners were those who focused on moving away from representation in dance towards a phenomenological body, meaning experience or consciousness-focused dance. Who are some of the new dance dancers who participated? Deborah Hay, Eva Schmaley, Jacques Van Eygen, and Les Ballets de la Baie. The point was, even though performance and new dance might be two different clubs on campus, they wanted to use this project to compare and contrast their approach to the indeterminable body. They had medical historians, archaeologists, and art and dance historians at this project. They rejected artists and projects interested in virtual reality, not because they saw them as insignificant, but because they wanted to focus on live work. Sounds to me like they let those duplicitous, devious, devilish Westerners convince them that there is such a thing as a real body, and that virtual technologies aren't the same thing as the body just because someone says they are. Those accursed Westerners, convincing people that things like bodies exist so that avant-garde art projects end up excluding virtual technology projects from their interdisciplinary explorations of the body. The chapters of this book collect statements and interviews from the projects and about the project. They mentioned that Belfast performance artist Alastair McLennan was the artist in residence, and that American performance artist Linda Montano took up astral residence for the duration of the event. They received special mention for the comparative invisibility of their work. Quote, they're very different but related explorations of physical presence absence provided an important touchstone for the project. It's as if this quote is teasing me with potentially amazing postmodern art cringe, but I can't have it. The chapter discussing these two was not included as a reading by my instructor, so I just don't have access to it. All I can think of when I hear the words astral presence is the cartoon Jackie Chan Adventures, where they use the sheep talisman to project themselves through walls on the astral plane. I just want to make believe that Linda Montano sat under a staircase meditating like Uncle from Jackie Chan Adventures, Yumo Gui Gui Fai Di Sao, and that while she was meditating, she actually believed she was fighting the Shadow Khan with Jackie Chan, and she kept making these cartoon kung fu noises in her trance, so that when these professors walk down the stairs, then they hear all these "Watcha! kung fu fighting sound effects. And the janitor just has to tell them, oh, never mind that. That's just American performance artist Linda Montano taking up astral residence under the stairs. Then all the professors just nod and walk away, mumbling about how remarkable and informative this project is. And the janitor just shakes his head. I almost hope I never find out what the heck Linda Montano's astral residence was for the Connected Body project. But who knows? Maybe it's at least as entertaining as what I'm imagining in my head. Oh my gosh. Because Montano and McLennan's work were comparatively invisible, whatever that means, and dealt with presence-absence, the authors had to collaborate with the artists to figure out how the heck to represent their contributions in the book. Do I want to know or do I not want to know what the hell this is talking about? I haven't been this excited about a spoiler since Snape killed Dumbledore. Moving on. The rest of the book was grouped around the themes of the 4 panel discussions. These 4 discussions were apparently led by Claire MacDonald and Doreen Mignot. I say apparently because the authors say MacDonald and Mignot focused the conversations, which I take to mean that they had a sort of master of ceremonies role, but given what we've read so far, I doubt it was that formal or structured. Accursed Westerners! The remainder of the introduction describes the 4-part of the symposium and the artists and academics involved. Because I only possess a few excerpts from this book, and the original is prohibitively expensive for me at this point, I'm going to discuss these summaries. Without getting to see the original art, we're having to piece some things together, but this seems like a good opportunity to get an overview of what the heck the Connected Body project was all about. Part 1, The Body and Healing, includes an interview with Marina Abramovic discussing the transformation of the known into something unknown in relation to her workshop, Clean the House, and how her performances involve potential risks. Enzo Cosi presents research on the healing and devotional practices of the Mestizo populations and the Aymara peoples of Chile. Now here's a question. Was his research included because they were interested in healing and devotional dances on a cultural level? Or were they included because they believe these dances actually function as a form of medicine? If you think I'm reading too much into this, here's the quote that makes me wonder. Cosi's fieldwork, quote, touches on aspects of social and self-healing by negotiating conflict and building bridges, and searching for the harmonization of contraries. So, on one level, he's describing these healing dances as a kind of conflict resolution or socializing aspect of these cultures, but they're described as self-healing, raising the question in my mind if these academics, in their strive to be multicultural and interdisciplinary, are discussing healing ritual dances and accepting the premise that they functionally heal people. Because the art of Alistair MacLennan and Fiona Sampson's poem in response to MacLennan are concerned with conflict resolution, they are included in this healing section. In addition, this section includes a provocative paper by Professor Roy Porter on how the 18th century body politic used medical representations of the human body for political purposes. Why is Porter interested in this subject? To deconstruct the history of Western Europe, of course. Porter's paper, quote, resists the cultural hierarchies and prejudices which have resulted in the traditional, disembodied histories of Western Europe by asserting the powerful presence of the body within them. They note that the version published in the book was heavily abridged from his original presentation, nor were they able to publish the medical illustrations he referenced. Whatever these medical illustrations were, which so concerned Professor Porter about the way Western civilization erases the body in order to create prejudice and hierarchies, they must have been some triggering medical illustrations indeed. Part 2 focuses on the represented body. It includes Viennese art historian Sylvia Abelmeyer's presentation on the work of Austrian media and body artist Vali Export. Abelmeyer focuses on Export's Feminist actionism, in which exports' use of the live body as a material part of the structure of representation was made explicit. So, in English, export is using her body to send a feminist message about the representation of the body, and probably the female body, in art. Other names included in this section: Johannes Lothar Schroeder, performance artist Sally Trelant, and dancer Deborah Hay. Schroeder wrote a letter to Linda Montano, the artist, you'll remember, who took up astral residence and was thus comparatively invisibly present at the conference. Was she just not there? Is that what they're trying to say? Is it worth $90 so I can answer this nagging mystery? Should I splurge? Let me know in the comment section if I just need to bite the bullet and get this freaking overpriced load of postmodern bilge. Or should it stay a mystery, like every Five Nights at Freddy's sequel after FNAF 2 should have been? Essentially, the artists are seeking to bridge a gap between the feminist actionism art, which involves the body, and Deborah Hay's holism. But what, you ask most desperately, is holism? And I answer thee, most mischievously, with this actual quote. What I call my mind is my whole body. What I call my body is 53 trillion cells. Sounds to me like a woman in a STEM field putting her degree to excellent use. What do you all think? Now this is where I stop laughing and start retching inside a little bit. Quote, Sally Tallant's provocative installation Scar predicates itself on an interaction which implicates the audience, both literally and metaphorically, in the violation of the body. Did this woman scar herself at an elite academic symposium? Finally, Ron Bunzel's essay titled Aha Nada described a dance workshop by Deborah Hay. The workshop was titled Intrinsically Appropriate Dancing. Part 3 focuses on the body as process. German performer Eva Schmely wrote a statement on the body as a site of perceptual awareness and understanding, a body that resists the reductionism of language and the alienating effect of mediatized images. Sounds like the definition of #woke to me. Continuing the theme of deconstructing that disgusting, debilitating, diabolical Western civilization and Western history, Eva Schmely's work is described as an attempt to shift the body from the invisible and disembodied histories that marginalize it toward a recognition of its centrality and resistant potential. Again, Western history, by focusing on things like what people thought and wrote about, has somehow marginalized the human body. And this postmodern exploration of the body, which by design is not seeking to reach any conclusive end to these thought processes, hopes to identify a way to resist this Western hegemony through their strange understanding of the body. In this same section, Johannes Beringer's essay, Reconstructions, puts the body on the periphery and places the body in the betweens of the border. Well, you know what would stop those peripheral bodies consigned to the betweens of the border? That's right, a big old wall, and the postmodern art professors will pay for it. Beringer argues that bodies, whether individual, social, or collective, ding, 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 Marxist commie pinko alarms are ringing, quote, are capable of being experienced because they are symbolic systems which participate in a political struggle over identity and legitimation and derive their authority from the symbolic, which, politically speaking, is a mechanism of dominance. This raised alarm bells for me on multiple levels. I've repeatedly cited the phrase, the personal is political. as an idea that is as important for feminists as the golden rule might be in Christianity, a slogan which describes how they perceive the entirety of people's personal lives as having political implications. Barbara Kruger's "Your body is a battleground" may be an explicitly pro-abortion message based on her usage of it, but now I'm drawing a new connection here. In Beringer's thinking, the body, whether we are talking about your body or a social body or a collective group, are part of a struggle for identity and legitimation in a power hierarchy. I'm going to make an inference here. Western capitalist patriarchy is the wielder of social power against these bodies which are seeking identity. In a nation that accepts Western philosophy and culture, you gain legitimacy as a person, as a human, by conforming to the capitalist patriarchy. By critiquing this mechanism of dominance, Beringer is suggesting individuals and groups who identify as a group can resist Western dominance by rejecting the Western concept of identity. But because Beringer considers Western identity a symbolic part of a dominance hierarchy, that would mean what most people think of as their identity is merely a social construct. It's not just gender that's a social construct. It's you and everything that makes you you that is a social construct, as long as you are not resisting Western individualism. I could be wrong, and feel free to correct me if you are more familiar with Beringer, but that's how I understand this summary of Beringer's view of identity. Hopefully reading the full essay will provide more context. Dutch dancer Pauline de Groot was a participant. Her work places the dancing body outside the theater. In the same word salad writing style I've come to expect, they describe something very straightforward, dancing in public spaces, as the specific dimension of the moment, which enacts a process of transformation within the daily routines of life. I hate the excess verbiage. This actually sounds like something nice. She dances in public. She shakes up people's daily routines a little bit. But everything needs to be thesaurused up. Robert Schwartz's paper is on body, space, and idea. Here we go again. You ready, everyone? Quote, "It develops a relationship between the body and language that sees the body as a process of spatialization that inscribes itself on language." Okay, Catholic and ex-Catholic friends of the channel, flashback to Sister Spinster's grammar class where she had you diagram a sentence. Remember the thread of that ruler that every Catholic school kid complains about? Now, I actually didn't have the nun, but my teacher still had that ruler. So I think we can all dive into this together. We're going to break down this sentence. Schwartz is the subject noun of the sentence. Developing is the verb. What is Schwartz developing? A relationship. Relationship is the direct object. What kind of relationship? Well, for that, we'll need a preposition. Preposition, starting with a be, betweens a preposition. Between what and what? Body, object of the preposition, and conjunction, what's your function? Language, object of the preposition. Have I lost any of you millennials or Gen Zs yet? Just go watch Schoolhouse Rock and you'll be up to speed. Okay, so far so good. There's a relationship between the body and language. Okay, what does this relationship do? I think the word "that" refers back to the relationship, not language, because otherwise this would be a completely confusing sentence. This relationship sees, verb, the body, direct object, as preposition, starting with an A. As what? As a process. All right, reading this way is actually helping. Remember Heraclitus at the beginning? You never step into the same river twice. The river is constantly changing, and you are constantly changing. There is no stable you. The body is a process. What kind of process is the body? A process of spatialization, existing in space, time, culture, place, history. Okay, that makes sense. You go out on Broadway on a Tuesday, your body is in a place and time in space. Uh-oh, what's this word "that" referring to? Well, it has to be referring to the process. This process inscribes itself in language. Okay, so maybe you're the bee's knees in 1930 and you do a sweet bicycle trick and some kid's lips move and he says, "That was so cool." There we go. We've coined the phrase cool as a compliment. You've left your impact on the English language. What the ever-loving garbage dumpster fire does this have to do with Western civilization and postmodern art? You've got me. My best guess is this has something to do with language, identity, and gender as social constructs, which is a perfect segue to Part 4, the final section, Oh Sweet Nectar to My Ears, the Constructed Body. Mike Pearson and Claudia Jeschke, quote, develop extensive structuralist approaches that are complemented by the literal transcription of a body-mind centering class by Jacques Van Eygen, and the reflections on the onstage and offstage body provided by Belgian choreographer Alain Platel, who is apparently affiliated with Les Ballets de l'Abbaye. I'm not going into middle school nun mode to diagram this sentence. What this alphabet soup probably means is that Pearson and Jeschke are going to write on structuralism in connection with performance art and a mind-body class they took. I want you to consider this the next time a professor waxes about their participation in an elite international interdisciplinary conference. It's at least a possibility that they took part in a Buddhist-style mindfulness workshop and wrote an essay on their experience, and that constitutes their contribution to the world of academia and the field of human knowledge. Mike Pearson writes about theater in connection with archaeology to, quote, suggest how the body in the past might engage with surface and volume, with object and backdrop, in extremis and in repose, in order to argue that in archaeology, people's connected bodies existed in time. And not just any time, mind you, but deep time. That adjective, deep, makes all the difference, as well as in space. So by talking about theater choreography, an archaeologist defends the thesis that, in centuries past, people's bodies existed in time and space? Do you have any hope that the full presentation is going to be worthwhile? Does this sound like astute scholarship to you? Hey guys, I've got a thesis. During the lifetime of Jesus, people had feet that stepped on streets. But then, the horrible, literally fascist Romans undertook a campaign of marginalizing feet from the pages of history. But through the power of new dance, we are all reminded that feet do, in fact, exist. Now pay your taxes to subsidize my research like a good little serf. Claudia Jeschke's paper representing the body, and I quote, oh my gosh, I can't take much more of this. Everyone, atheists, I need your thoughts and prayers. It's time to get right with Jesus and pray for me to survive this. I am actually literally shaking while reading this. Jeschke, quote, provides an illuminating typology of the phenomenological body in dance in relation to strategies of dramaturgy and choreography from the 16th century to the present. I'm not going to try. I read it. That alone took all I had. The authors mentioned that they were not able to republish her extensive illustrations. Quote, her closing remarks assert that a disjunction between the body as presence and the body as representation do not apply to a body used in a theatrical context where the phenomenological body was never disconnected from the strategies of representation, i.e., of dramaturgy or choreography. If I had to guess, this is about representation of the human body in general, and the female body in particular in the history of art. Jeschke is looking hopefully for a representation of the human body which is non-westernized by looking to theater. The author's closing paragraph describes the Connected Body project as a diverse collection of approaches and encourages the reader to sample the variety presented in the book. They hope this mishmash will, quote, support the notion of a new authenticity that embraces complementary and contradictory positions vis-a-vis the body as we move into a future where questions of the identity and experience of the body will be as pressing as ever. It's this final paragraph that gives me hope as I struggle to read stuff like this, that I'm not just too stupid to understand what is being said. They are encouraging the reader as their hope for the book to embrace contradictory positions about the supposed new authentic body. They boast of the diversity of perspectives and approaches, but I want to underscore what I think is a fatal flaw. The diversity of thought was a diversity of approaches to rejecting Western culture. They didn't invite any Ayn Randian objectivists, Hayek-influenced economists, advocates of Western civilization or the value of Western philosophy, or conservative theologians to provide some additional perspectives to their interdisciplinary exploration of the body. You weren't invited to get to this little get-together to showcase your watercolor paintings of pastoral landscapes. This entire project assumed ideas about the rejection of Western identity and the social construction of identity as a baseline. I want to remind you that the topic of this book, in theory, is not the deconstruction of Western philosophy from a social justice perspective, but a book on performance art to be used as a textbook for students to read in an art class. Do you feel like you've learned anything significant about art after going through this essay with me? Do you think art students who came to art school because they love to draw gained anything from this robust academic project? Was their craft improved? Was their ability to make money and support a family and pay off their student loans improved as a result of reading this? What I realized while participating in class discussions about essays and assigned readings in this vein was, when I entered into the classroom feeling stupid for not understanding the material, what I realized is that I often understood it much better than the majority of my classmates, and this was reflected in my grades. More often, classroom conversations would wander to personal subjects or topics in the news, like patriarchal male gaze in recent comic books. Even progressive students wanted to turn the conversation to more concrete, understandable topics. I think the function of these types of art classes isn't to edify. It's certainly not to instruct in practical art skills, and I don't even think it's intended to present a defensible thesis, like Western philosophy's view of identity is flawed for the following reasons, A, B, C. I think the art classes which teach this material use it as a kind of foundation. The classroom discussions are not structured around the idea that the value of Western civilization is up for a friendly debate. The classroom discussion is structured based on the idea that it is settled science that gender identity, identity itself, and the body are constructed. The classroom discussion then prompts students to identify ways in their own lives they see this agreed upon thesis at work. Sure, you might occasionally get a campus libertarian or conservative who pipes up and offers a counter perspective, but the structure of a postmodern art class assumes the value of postmodern art and its critique of Western values as a starting point. It's difficult for someone who rejects the deconstructionist view of Western history to participate in a discussion on competing ideas on how to construct a new, non-Western idea of the body. We are asking art students to participate in in-house debates between competing groups united in their rejection of Western individualist identity as a valid and culturally important concept. But what's the importance of all this? Are silly postmodern ideas about art just contained to bizarre art shows and galleries? Is it sort of innocuously amusing? I don't think so. And what I hope to show in this series, which will complement my ongoing series, Feminism and Art, is that this view of art has already gained immense power and cultural influence, even if avant-garde performance art itself remains something mostly appreciated by a tiny, wealthy subculture. Remember the name Marina Abramovic? Her name comes up a lot in postmodern art classrooms. In 2016, I started hearing her name for a different reason, in connection with her body art projects that John Podesta and possibly Hillary Clinton participated in. Now, Snopes, a garbage fact-checking site, fact-checked this story because some people were accusing Hillary Clinton and John Podesta of engaging in spirit-cooking satanic rituals. That was their justification for labeling the story false. But the fact check is disingenuous. You could be an atheist or anyone who doesn't believe that Satan is real and still find it bizarre that a presidential candidate would either attend or participate in intentionally and explicitly ritualistic, postmodern, and body art projects. As a New York senator, Hillary Clinton was part of the elite club who regularly attends and advocates for tax subsidies for these elite postmodern gallery shows in major art institutions. As far as I'm concerned, the Satanism angle was largely focused on by the mainstream media to create the stink of conspiracy theory around the story and to ignore a crucial question. Why is there a growing political divide between those who appreciate things like painting and sculpture as art and those who value postmodern theory as the gradual substitute for art in the public imagination? I've said it before and I'll say it again. This isn't just about a few coastal blue state eggheads having a weird art show. To the professional postmodern academics who participated in this book and the project that prompted it, this is about creating a culture that rejects Western ideas of individual identity, and because they view culture as constructing identity and molding the individual into conformity with the culture's values, what they must mean is they are interested in every aspect of the culture, down to the low arts of video games, comic books, and popcorn movies and TV. All of them are a potential avenue of bringing the values, language, and ideas of feminist actionism or body art out of an elite, privileged art institution and into your living room. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. If you enjoyed this video, you can support this channel with a like, a comment, or a subscribe. If you click the bell, you'll receive notifications of when I have more videos come out in this series.
Thank you for listening to Great Works of Postmodern Garbage. Remember, this show is supported by viewers like you.